So the 287G officers give us a giant leg up on that in Tulsa County and allow us to identify those foreign-born nationals who are actually criminals. And we really jump way ahead of some other counties by having that.
Very fortunate to have with us tonight David Parker, who's our Tulsa County Jail Administrator. He joined the staff there in 2017, last year in April, appointed by Sheriff Regalado. He brings 30 years of experience in the field of corrections to the game. And one of the things that he's really focused on is showing respect for those who are incarcerated. And he's done a great deal of work with the mental health pods that we have now down at the county jail. So he's here to speak to us tonight about 287G and some other things going on down at the county jail. So with that, I give you David Parker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First thing I'd like to say is that it's refreshing to actually have a conversation with someone my age, so I appreciate you very much being here. I graduated high school in a town called Ringwood, Oklahoma. Has anybody ever heard of Ringwood? Yes. You grew up in Enid. Well, Enid's a suburb of Ringwood. I graduated with 17 people in my class. I decided that I was going to go to college, and I really wasn't a very good student, but I wasn't a bad football player. So I went to Northwestern Oklahoma State University to play a little football, and soon found out I really wasn't that good of a football player, so I thought I'd have to study a little bit. So I went to work for the Woods County Sheriff's Department. Spent a couple years working for them while I was going to college, studying law enforcement and biology. I had this big vision of being a game ranger in the state of Oklahoma. Then I found out what they paid. And I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and be a sheriff. And then I went to work for the sheriff, and I certainly wish I'd went to work for the game rangers. But having said all of that, I was in college one day, and they had a career day like they do at all colleges. And I walked over, and the state of Oklahoma was there, and they were in these nice, shiny uniforms, and their brass was all shined up, and their uniforms were new. And they put this hard sell on everybody that walked by, and then they threw down what they were going to pay me. Well, it almost doubled what I was making for Woods County. And at that point in time, as a young man, I was starting families and thought it'd be a great idea to go work there a year, maybe 2 years, while I finished my college. And 31 years later, I woke up and went, I'm still not a game ranger. But I had a great career working for the state of Oklahoma, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I started out as an entry-level correctional officer for the state of Oklahoma. I've worked in places that when I look back on it, I'm glad I was young and dumb and didn't understand some of the things that I was doing in some of the places I worked in. And to Sheriff Regalado's credit, I want to thank him and tell you that on his behalf, he wasn't able to be here because the sheriff is booked for so many events. And I just felt honored that he allowed me to come up and thank Under Sheriff Brown for saying, you get up there and go first. So when you look back I've worked at every part of the state of Oklahoma except for Tulsa. Things in life, when you sit back and you rely on your faith and you make paths and plan, life seems to come together for you. Life is, you want everybody to be happy. You want everybody to have a good life. You want to have everybody to have those opportunities. But you're not always entitled to that. You have to go out and earn your way. And you meet people and you build those relationships. And as you know that are businessmen and women, relationships are what get you in a lot of places. And so I was able to meet the sheriff through a mutual friend, and the time was right for me. I was director of Division II for the state of Oklahoma, and it was just time. You know when it's time to walk away. And you've given what you believe you can in service. And Sheriff Regalado come to me, and we had this meeting, and he talked about vision. and he talked about transparency, and he talked about accountability, and he talked about systems, and he talked about service to Tulsa County. And everything he said were those values that had been instilled in me all my life. And I'm such a firm believer in measurable outcomes that it's real easy to say you do something, but until you can actually prove you did something, it's just lip service. And so the sheriff has given me a clean slate, as the undersheriff has, to go into the jail, make multiple changes. With their support, we've been able to put in a career pathway for detention professionals and remove those deputies from that jail who cost a whole lot more than a detention officer, put them on the streets protecting the citizens of Tulsa County, and given people who just really don't want to be a police officer a career pathway. They can promote to lieutenants and corporals and sergeants and have long careers and invest in the future. And we've developed succession plans that we hope we leave this place better when we got here. And I think that's all to Sheriff Regalado's credit. And so if you haven't had a chance to meet him, he's one of the most genuine people you'll ever meet. And I know he would like to be here. But you didn't come here to hear me talk about myself. But I am going to say this one last thing about me. You know, like I say, I've been all over the state of Oklahoma, and I'd never really been to Tulsa. And when I come, I was a little skeptical because I was in Edmond at the time. I'm really not a city boy. You know, as you tell, growing up and graduating with 19 people, I kind of like the rural area. But what I have found is that while Tulsa's a very progressive metropolis, it's a very small community. And some of those values that I grew up with and was raised with, I see in Tulsa. I actually live in an area that's very metropolitan, but I can't see a house around me. And I have creeks that I can go down to and throw rocks at tadpoles. And I can jump in the water and splash around and play like I was a kid. And so that's some of the things that I really love. And Tulsa's my home now. And Tulsa's going to be my home. And I say, when I tell you about the jail, the passion comes from I'm going to be a citizen of this place. And so the jail and the sheriff's office is also accountable to me and transparent to me. So I'm in wholeheartedly, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to talk about the 287G program. 287G, ICE, whether it's IGS or it is our PBNDS 2011 contract, it's confusing. It took me a year to figure it out. And so it's really hard for citizens who don't deal with it on a daily basis to really understand the difference. And they're very distinctly different. We have a PBNDS 2011 contract in the jail, which has absolutely very little to do with 287G. What that program is that ICE has been really stepping up under President Trump's tutelage, the borders. They have started to detain lots and lots of immigrants, foreign-born nationals, as they come in. So ICE has to have a place to put those people, because obviously ICE doesn't manage prisons and jails, so they've got to have some place to detain these people. So that's where we come in. Us and many other people have areas within our jails that are unoccupied at this time. So ICE is paying us to provide this service of $69 a day. And you say $69 a day sounds like a lot of money. Well, it's not a whole lot of money. We're not losing money, but we're certainly not making money because salaries, we have to provide medical care, we have to feed, we have to clothe, we have to provide utilities. And when you start adding all that up in your budget, it gets right at $69. But we still feel that, and Sheriff Regalado feels, that it is something that's beneficial, mutually beneficial for everybody right now. Now, having talked about the PBNDS contract that we have, that is totally separate from 287G. What 287G stands for is a governmental code. And basically what that governmental code says is that we will detain criminals, and they'll work cooperatively with local jurisdiction to arrest and detain and identify criminals. I brought some handouts that are from ICE. Those are produced by ICE. Those are not the sheriff's office. And it gives you a little brief overview of what 287G is. I also brought this document, and I didn't bring enough for everybody, and I apologize, but they've been passed out. Feel free to look at them. And it tells you what the arrests are in Tulsa County from January 1st to date for 287G. And if you look at that grand total, we've only arrested 152 people, which is a big misnomer from what you've probably heard. Because 287G is actually criminals, people that violate statutory law, that are raping people, that are murdering people, that are robbing people, that are dealing in illegal substances. And those are the people that are criminals, and we target criminals regardless if it's Tulsa-born or foreign-born. That's what we do, law enforcement. And so 287G is a primary function of law enforcement. The advantage we have on 287G is that ICE takes our employees, sends them at the government's expense, trains them on how to identify and utilize the federal forms to fill out the paperwork and identify people as foreign-born nationals through types of questioning from different tactics that they've taught them in the academy. So while we supply some employees, and that does cost Tulsa County, those people are doing other functions beside ICE too. There are detention officers who work in the jail, and so if they're not dealing with ICE people, they're dealing with regular detention officer duties, and do on quite a bit of occasions. But again, that gives us the opportunity to identify these foreign-born criminals in Tulsa County and put them not only in the state judicial system, but once that process is complete, we've already identified them and we hand them right over to ICE instead of letting them out. Because you'll see, you could have incidents where someone comes in with a really quality fake ID, or somebody's come in and represents himself as somebody else, and before we could identify them, they may be able to make bond, because as you know, everybody that gets arrested that's a citizen is entitled to bond. And so if they get that bond, slip away, go back to whatever country it is for a little bit, spend some time there, come back and start the process over. So the 287G officers give us a giant leg up on that in Tulsa County and allow us to identify those foreign-born nationals who are actually criminals. And we really jump way ahead of some other counties by having that. I would be remiss if I didn't identify Sheriff or Under Sheriff Brown and ask him to come up and say a few things if you'd like to. I appreciate you letting me go first.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Dave and I have a special bond. He's a retired state guy, and I'm an old retired state guy. I worked 20 years for the Highway Patrol and retired as a troop commander, and came over with Sheriff Vick as his undersheriff about 3 years ago. And so Dave and I, we have this special bond. So he kind of gets me and I kind of get him. But I want to tell you a story real quick. Part of my duties a few years ago was I was an investigator. In the Highway Patrol, we called them CIs, or criminal investigators. You know them locally as detectives. We investigated crimes and major crimes. And so the CIs on the OHP, we had everything, right? Everything from a small larceny all the way up to a murder. One night I was called, are there any children in the room? This is all adults, right? One night I was called to a sexual offense over in East Tulsa. I was assisting a Tulsa police squad, and we were looking for a suspect who was in the area. We knew him to be in the area. We knew that he probably lived in the area. But what had happened was a young African-American female in her 20s. It was early in the evening. She had just fed her infant baby. She lived in a little one-room apartment in East Tulsa. She had put the baby down after feeding, and then she had went to bed. She was awakened by her boyfriend who had just left, who crawled in bed with her, nudged her, only when she turned over, to her surprise, it was not her boyfriend. It was a home invader who pulled a knife out, put it to her throat, and then began to violently sexually offend this poor young lady. He had his way, and then he exited out the screen patio door, that of which he had broken into. So we canvassed the area, and it only took us within an hour to find the suspect and make an arrest. That suspect was a foreign-born national, undocumented person living and working in Tulsa County. Now, as Mr. Parker had told you a while ago, sometimes when these offenses happen, if you do not have the 287G program in place and a bond is placed on that suspect who is brought into custody, they are able to slip away and go back across the border, and then we may or may not be able to retrieve them to answer for those crimes. Fortunately, in this county, you have the 287G program, and ICE places a detainer on that suspect, and in my case, we were able to put that federal hold on that suspect, and he was made to answer for that crime. He was not able to slip away. This is a good tool for the criminal justice system, and this is a good tool for people in Tulsa County. I just wanted to share that story with you. It's a really good illustration. It's a terrible event, but a good illustration of what that program can do to bring criminals to justice. And I thank you for your time today. I'm going to turn it back over to Dave.
Like I said, there is such a confusion because there's even another contract we haven't even talked about, the IGS contracts, but we don't have one of those here in Tulsa. 287G is basic law enforcement. That's really what it boils down to. Some of the tools we have allows us to do it much better. You'll hear these stories from certain organizations that we arrest people for minor traffic. I would challenge you to find many minor traffic in here. What you will find is a couple of traffic arrests that led to a lot of other things. I don't know about you, but I've even got tickets. And so if you break the traffic laws, you actually get pulled over. And during those, we have found people that are foreign-born nationals. But usually what you find is there is a whole lot of other charges that go along with that. So I encourage you to look at this. I published it. I'll stand by these facts because they're everything that's booked into the jail. We had, like I say, 152 inmates that have been booked in on the 287G project. It even breaks it down by what town they were arrested in, or whether it was the highway patrol or Tulsa County. I will tell you, a lot of Tulsa counties has to do with the ones that do come back to court, and we have courthouse surrenders and stuff, so our numbers are really heavy skewed with surrenders.
If I'm in a car accident, as I have been twice, involving an individual that speaks no English and is likely not a citizen and does not have insurance, would this program allow that to lead to possible arrest of that individual if in fact they are an illegal alien?
Well, at the time, and again, I'm going to defer most of this to Under Sheriff Brown, but the 287G program, if they come into the jail for whatever reason, we will at that time start the process.
Yeah, I'll field that question. So possibly, the answer is possibly, if that person has warrants out, criminal warrants, otherwise, maybe. Yes, if it's a minor offense, no. We do not have anybody in the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office working for us as a deputy, have about 265 certified deputies, and they do not have the authority to go out and arrest someone for a federal crime. They do not have the authority to go out and do roundups for being undocumented. They will not go do that. What happens is the 287G program stays within the walls of the jail. Now, in your situation, if you're involved in a hit and run, which is a felony, then yes, if that hit and run collision is investigated and that person happens to be undocumented and they're found to be a foreign-born national, then they will go into the 287G program. On a minor offense, no, it will not happen. Am I going to sit here and say that it has never happened? No, I'm not going to do that because some of these arrests have occurred outside Tulsa County. Yeah, it's very frustrating. I will tell you first and foremost, right off the bat, that my wife's been a victim of that. She was rear-ended and now has a lifelong injury to her jaw because of someone who was undocumented and did not have insurance and caused an injury to her in a traffic accident. Unfortunately, all that's required in Oklahoma is the compulsory insurance law says that all you're required to have is liability insurance. If you do not have insurance, we have stiffened the law to say now your vehicle can get towed, now your license can get suspended through the financial responsibility, but that has nothing to do with 287G. So to answer your question, I'd be interested in going into talks for something like that.
Sure. Okay. One quick question, actually two. It's my understanding that we've had 287G. It's not just a new program. We've had it since 2007. Is that correct?
Correct.
See, that's something nobody else really points out. That this is a normal operating procedure for our county. Also, you mentioned cost, and I hear the number $290,000, but I don't really think it's a cost. Isn't it just an investment in public safety of keeping people that can harm more people in jail? I think we ought to not call it a cost anymore. It's an investment in public safety, and it's helping to keep less victims and the offenders in jail, or it might lead to deportation. But I think we're kind of looking at it the wrong way when we say cost. So,
thank you.
I have a question, or a comment. I'd kind of like to change the subject a little bit. A couple of years ago, when you opened the mental health pods in the jail,
My first day of work, actually.
First day of work, okay. A group of us were invited to come down and tour the facilities before any inmates were actually in there, okay? And if you've never been in the jail, it's quite fascinating to see how it's set up, and they actually have areas that are, if someone is really violent, they can segregate them from everybody else, but most of the people are in a group setting, right? I mean, they have a few,
yes, ma'am.
Few separate rooms. But what was amazing to me was the few number of jail attendees that managed a large number of inmates. Typically, you only have like 3 or 4 people in a room with maybe...
Or one
with 30 or 40 or 50 inmates. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be fascinating, that they could maintain control of that many inmates with so few people.
Our ratio is usually about 90 inmates to 1 staff. And we do that, and we're able to do that for a lot of reasons, but a lot of it has to do with some of the training programs that Sheriff Regalado has instilled. Everybody that comes to jail has, I shouldn't say everybody, but if you go to jail, it's probably a little mental fatiguing on you. And so when you look at some of the people that do come to jail that have come repeatedly, a lot of that is associated with mental illness. And Tulsa County has been very progressive in some of the platforms and in some of the groups and organizations to try to deal with some of this. I'm very proud of our partnership through it with our mental health program that we have in our pods. But we train our employees to be humans. That you don't have to run up and bow up and puff that chest out to get what you want done. Matter of fact, you get less done by doing that, and that's a big misnomer. I'd rather have a 5'3", 115-pound woman than I would a 7-foot, 400-pound guy, because that woman has probably developed some skills that are enable her to get along, communicate. They realize that I'm probably not going to whoop this person, so I'm going to have to talk them into doing what I want. And those are some of the training models we use at the jail, and we do it to save not only our employees, but to also save you from having to pay for those worker comp cases. You know, one workers' comp case can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And by teaching this in our academies, we're able to minimize some of those costs. I think if you go back and look at some of the injuries and some of the use of forces and some of the litigations that happened prior to Sheriff Regalado taking over, you'd be amazed at the cost that man has saved this county. So kudos to that vision for him to put in those training programs and let us march forward with our direct supervision model. Now, does that to say we don't have problems? No, it's a jail. There's probably nobody in there for singing too loud in church.
David, I've got two quick questions. I noticed on this report it says Tulsa Police Department. I thought they had their own jail. So are they bringing people from Tulsa PD
Everything
over
on
to
here
the county?
Is a state charge. Tulsa, all the municipal jails that we have, those jails house ordinance violations, usually some lower level misdemeanor. But if they come to our jail, it's because it's a state charge.
Is Tulsa paying you for those people?
No, but nobody else is either. Because, again, it's a state charge, not a municipal charge.
Okay, second question. What's the status of the general population pod that was in the last construction? We did a mental health, and I was involved in that construction. Mm-hmm. We did a mental health pod, and we did this open general population. Mm-hmm. What's the status of that general population?
It is full.
It is full?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Again, I opened both of those. Yes. I'll tell you.
It was a great concept for people just wanted to hang out.
Well, what it's really did for us, one of the things that, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but since Sheriff Regalado's took over, the count in the county jail is down significantly. It was hovering up 1750. We run about 1450 now. And so some of that was, some of the changes and things we did, some of the programmatic things. We were able to shut down several of the pods that we had open and utilize those resources other places. But it takes a whole lot less money to operate one of those open bay than it does one of those lockdown areas. So what we did was transition into those open bays and, for lack of a better word, mothballed some of those higher security that cost more money to run. Again, as a savings to you.
I'd like you to talk about the bail system in this state. I've heard some really just unsettling and wild things about how the bail bond system here works. And I'd like to know if you can shed any light on that. It sounds, well, just tell me what you think of it, what's working and what maybe is not working about it.
Well, right now, as you're well aware, bonds are being looked at all over the country. I sit on this group called the Large Jail Network, which involves some of the larger jails across the country, and we meet a couple of times a year, and this is one of the topics we talk about every time. Bonds, for years and years, have been, if you have enough money, you can get out of jail, unless your crime's so heinous that it, they deny you the bond. And so what we've seen in the last few years is a reduction in bonds because it cost us about $69 a day to keep an inmate in jail. And if that inmate has a very low-level offense, and I use that because in my business, I have really big offenses that it costs me more money to house them and guard them. It costs me a whole lot more to take care of somebody that's a cartel member than it does somebody that actually was picked up for a DUI. Now, DUI is a bad crime, and I wholeheartedly support that. But I'm using DUI is most of those people come in and sober up, and there's not any problems with them. But if you put a bail on them, that's $1,500, $1,000, but yet they haven't had a paycheck for months, or some other factor is into play. Should that person be sitting in that jail costing you about $69 a day? Or should we look at some of the bail reform and go, we're going to let you out, and you're going to go work and you're going to pay your taxes. So I'm not lining up on either side of that fence, but I'll tell you a lot of bonds are set statutorily. We also have bonds that are set by our judges. So we have bond schedules, so if you come in with a certain bond, it tells us right then what it costs so you can bail out, because really as a taxpayer, if someone's not been convicted, I'm not sure that some of those lower levels offenses need to stay in jail. They need to be paying their taxes. And I know that probably didn't answer your question, but I don't think there's a real good answer for it right now. We've got actual, what's that Senate bill, 86 right now that's dealing with bail reform in the state of Oklahoma, and so that, I think that'll tell us a lot.
Lori, can I follow up on that real quick?
Sure. Jim, we'll get right back to you.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to follow up. The Eighth Amendment says that excessive bail shall not be levied. So the question is there anything that is dealing with what the line is for excess? Because there's no line, it just says excessive bail. And I see a lot of bail that seems way high, much higher than some people could ever hope to pay. And maybe they even end up being innocent, but they're mortgaging their house just to get out of jail. What is going on, and where do you stand on bail?
There's many spokes of the judicial system, and my job is to detain people. So the bonds that I issue are set by someone else. So it's really hard for me to make a comment on that. Sometimes I see a bond and I go, ooh, man. And sometimes somebody will get out on an aggregate bond from somebody that was on the bench that I go, oh my God, why aren't they getting out? So it's really hard for me to say, and to have an opinion on it. I try to stay away from things that don't personally involve me. But as a taxpayer, I do get concerned, and so I am following these as well. And I've looked at grids. You know, I've looked at sentencing grids. I've looked at the bond grids and everything. And in certain cases, I think, man, we need a grid. But then you look at the federal system that whether I get a pound of dope or I got a joint, I'm still getting the same amount of time. So I'm not sure how we take the human factor out of it.
Thanks, Jim.
Could you comment on the overall effect from top on down that the cartels have on crime here in Tulsa County? And also, do you have any national figures that would show how Tulsa County would compare crime-wise with other similar size cities or on a per capita basis with other cities?
Well, I'm going to defer this to Under Sheriff Brown, but what I can tell you is that polls are skewed to whoever puts them together. So I seen we were the 16th most violent city a couple of years ago, and when I seen that, it made me giggle. So
cartels are one of the most dangerous criminal organizations on the face of the earth right now. In the 80s, you had the Cali cartel, and the cocaine that was coming out of Colombia was entering the United States through the coastal regions. Now it's organized business. It's all business. You have the MS-13. You have other cartels. You have Colombian cartel, Mexican cartels. There's so many cartels from different parts of the world. Here's what I saw on the highway patrol. We had a special operations division that targeted drug traffickers up and down the turnpike. I-44 and I-35 was a corridor in the United States for everything going south and everything coming in. So we targeted those main lines. You've seen the troopers in their Tahoes and their dogs sitting on the main line on the turnpikes, right? We averaged, on average, about $500,000 to $1 million in drug seizure money a month in the state of Oklahoma. I'll tell you, we weren't getting 1% of what was coming in, not 1%. It is so dangerous that when I took over the Public Affairs Division for Department of Public Safety, I would not allow our Special Operations troopers to be interviewed because of their name tags. We know that the cartel did counterintelligence against our troopers. We know that because we did countermeasures and did investigations to see that they had information coming in against our troopers. It is an utterly dangerous situation. The effects on Tulsa, I'll tell you, they're going right up and down I-44 daily. There's one of two things that we're looking for in law enforcement on a traffic stop, either drugs or money and weapons. I can tell you that it got so dangerous that we had to start looking past the traffic stop, because when cartel members were bringing $300,000 and $400,000 worth of drugs in their vehicles, they had armed guards behind them a quarter of a mile. So we had to start working in pairs. And a trooper on a traffic stop that was a high-risk stop had to look for the car that came behind him that was armed with submachine guns. That's happening today in Oklahoma. Yes.
So has there ever been a case of troopers gunned down by the security guys for a cartel?
Has there been a case? Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. Not to say it hasn't happened, but there has been some drug-related shootouts in the Oklahoma City area. I did respond to one, maybe two of those. Don't know if it was cartel-related or not. Probably couldn't speak on the fact that if it was. But I can tell you it's a dangerous, dangerous situation.
Just as a quick follow-up, I know this involves an opinion, but in your opinion, are there any U.S. citizens involved in these cartels, or are these primarily foreign nationals that shouldn't be here at all?
I'm certain that everyone's involved.
How does that relate to human trafficking?
Very closely related, and I'll tell you why. Drugs are a expendable commodity, and a human is not. For instance, I-35 and I-40 was the corridor I spoke about for the drug trafficking. It also is a corridor in Midwestern states for human trafficking. And cartel and human trafficking members were targeting those 10, 11, and 12-year-olds because they could turn them over and over and over, and they could continue making money until they aged out, which is usually the age of 17 or 18. So it's a very real problem that we're facing as law enforcement agencies.
Regarding bail reform, there's a law firm that's going around the country suing county sheriff's operations on how bail is being set, and they're attacking it from different methods. You know, some states have laws that say financial capacity of a jail detainee needs to be established, you know, in a hearing. And so they're suing and winning repeatedly. And possibly someday Tulsa County might be in their crosshairs, because there is a local firm here that sued the county and or the sheriff's office over jail inmates dying. Smullen, I believe is the firm's name. I don't know that they're involved in this national initiative on challenging bail bond requirements. Do you have any comments?
No, sir. I'm sorry, I don't.
This is kind of a change of the topic here, but I'm a volunteer, and I actually go into the jail as a volunteer on Friday nights representing Celebrate Recovery. And I just want to, I don't know who to thank, but I appreciate everything y'all do to accommodate the volunteers that go in there, because it's making a big difference in those people's lives. So I just want to thank you so much.
This guy right here, and I think a round of applause would be totally appropriate for him.
We have well over 450 volunteers that come into the jail in some capacity or another, and God, thank you for that service, because we barely have enough money to operate on, and there's no way that we could pay people to come in and provide the services that our volunteers do. You know, people will look back at some of our volunteer stuff, and I'm sure you've seen some of it downstairs. Any of you do yoga?
I'm not good.
Yeah, we do. It's pretty popular too. But again, volunteerism, vast majority of them are religious volunteers, but we have volunteers that come in and provide many service, whether that's substance abuse services, exercise and those things. So we're grateful for all of us. And so actually, I say you're the one that deserves the round of applause. So thank you for doing that for us.
This question might be for Undersheriff. So it's come up in a lot of these that I've heard in the county commission meetings that people are afraid, undocumented residents are afraid to report crime for fear of being deported, okay? So my question is, Crime Stoppers is a joint venture with Tulsa County Sheriff, Tulsa Police Department. They do have bilingual people 24/7. Is there anything we're doing, and that is a totally anonymous tip line, is there anything we're doing to promote that in where undocumented residents can make reports of crimes against them? And is it really a problem? Are they really afraid if they're raped or stabbed to report a crime?
Good question. The problem is in misinformation. There is some fear mongering going on. I will tell you that the sheriff and I, sometimes, Mr. Parker, we attend the Hispanic Chamber of Tulsa Luncheon every month. It's at Speedy's Mexican restaurant over at 21st and Memorial. We go every month, and we share information with the folks in the Hispanic Chamber. We share information with other law enforcement agencies and the district attorney's office, and they in turn bring Hispanic news to those luncheons. We do interpreted interviews for the folks that are English as second language, and we explain exactly how to complete a report, how to contact your local law enforcement agency. So the information is getting out there. There is some fear, but it's coming from some fear-mongering, misinformation special interest groups who I don't know why they wish to spread that type of fear, but I really wish they would reconsider doing that because it's counterproductive to our message. We want the folks to know, and we go every month to this group faithfully, and we do interviews on Hispanic news, radio, and television to share exactly our message on how to contact us to report a crime. So the information I know is getting out there. We also have a community policing unit, and one of the heads of that community policing unit within our agency, Monica Blendowski, is fluent in Spanish. In fact, I think English is her second language, isn't it? And she goes to every minority event that she can find, and that includes the local Hmong population, the Hispanics. We visited some Arab groups, and we've also spread that message on how to contact us if you need police services. So we are very, very active, and I can tell you I get a report from that community policing group, and they go to about 250 groups per year to spread that message, and we contact in excess of 100,000 people.
Rodrigo actually sits on the Jail Citizens Advisory Board, and so that information is being spread throughout the community.